The New York Times, Wednesday, 17th of February, 1988. Richard Feynman, arguably the most brilliant, iconoclastic and influential of the post-war generation of theoretical physicists, died of abdominal cancer in Los Angeles on Monday night. He was 69 years old.
The way I think of what we're doing is we're exploring, we're trying to find out as much as we can about the world. People say to me, are you looking for the ultimate laws of physics? No, I'm not. I'm just looking to find out more about the world. And if it turns out there is a simple ultimate law that explains everything, so be it. That would be very nice to discover. If it turns out it's like an onion with millions of layers and we're just sick and tired of looking at the layers, then that's the way it is. But whatever way it comes out, its nature is there and she's going to come out the way she is. And therefore, when we go to investigate it, we shouldn't pre-decide what it is we're trying to do except to find out more about it. If you say, but your problem is, why do you find out more about it? If you thought that you were trying to find out more about it because you're going to get an answer to some deep philosophical question, you may be wrong. It may be that you can't get an answer to that particular question by finding out more about the character of nature. But I don't look at it. My interest in science is to simply find out about the world. And the more I find out, the better it is. I like to find out.
Feynman disliked writing, and his autobiography, an informal collection of remarkable adventures inside and outside science, was edited from tape recordings made by his friend Ralph Layton.
I opened the safes which contain behind them the entire secret of the atomic bomb.
I had the feeling of jewels slipping through my fingers. I couldn't believe how many crazy things he had done. He was full of surprises. He also had an acceptance of so many different kinds of people. He didn't make me feel like I'm some kind of small, infinitesimal intellect. I found it, in fact, kind of odd that my father, who's a professor of physics and who edited his lectures, was uncomfortable with Feynman because he was able to appreciate how much more Feynman knew or what kinds of insights Feynman was capable of, and felt himself quite inadequate in the presence of Feynman. I, being so oblivious to all of this, was more relaxed.
Two weeks before Feynman died, we recorded a conversation at his house in Los Angeles on a home video camera. He talked about his many adventures with Ralph, including their 10-year obsession with a strange and remote country called Tannu, Tuva.
He's a very good friend of mine. I like to tease him a little. And he had been teaching arithmetic and algebra, rather, in high school. And then he told us that they gave him a geography class. I know that he would do a fairly good job in geography because he listens to the shortwave, and therefore he gets a pretty good feel where everything is. Nevertheless, I wanted to tease him. So I said, oh, you know all about geography, huh? And he answered, yeah, he listens shortly. I said, okay, whatever happened to Tannu, Tuva? Because as a matter of fact, it was in the back of my head always. I knew that there was this country when I was a kid that my father explained to me was an independent country that had these interesting stamps. I think he had shown me on the map where it was, and it was a purple area in the middle of some big green thing in the middle of Asia somewhere. And as time went on, I never heard of it again. And it's supposed to be an independent country, so it must have disappeared somehow. And so in the back of my mind was this question. And I said, whatever happened to Tannu, Tuva? Because I knew damn well he'd never heard of it. And also that he'd think I was kidding him, that there was such a thing, because I like to tease by that kind of method, you see, you're making up a country that doesn't exist. And so he said, I'm making up a country that doesn't exist. Oh yeah? I said, I got the encyclopedia out, and we looked it up on a map, and sure enough, there's a Tannu Tuva. And that was a surprise. And where was it? Just outside of Outer Mongolia, in the middle of Central Asia, in the depths of Russia, far away from anything. And it was no longer an independent country. It was a part of Russia, and we saw that the capital, this is what did it, the capital was Kyzyl. My wife and I and he, at the same time, looked and grinned at each other, because any place that's got a capital named Kyzyl's just gotta be interesting. We couldn't get any information at all. At first, we started out in San Francisco when we were there playing drums for a ballet. We had a job. And then we would use the spare time to go to the library. And we didn't know where to begin, so we thought we'd go to Travels in Central Siberia, which is right where it is, Central Siberia. So you get all these books of people traveling in Central Siberia. And nobody went through Tuva. They went down around below it, or they went around above it. But whenever they went through Central Siberia, they missed it, because it was a kind of a bowl. And if you went down in, you'd have to climb back out. And there was no particular reason to go through it. It was just in the way, so everybody seemed to dodge it. So surprisingly, in spite of all these books about travels in Central Siberia, we found no information.
Then one day, Feynman and Ralph came across a rare book published in Berlin in 1931 and written by the German historian and explorer Otto Menschenhelfen.
I was the first non-Russian to set foot in the Republic of Tuva. It took a lot of trouble to obtain permission to go. I went as an ethnologist, pointing out that ethnologists are as harmless as mushroom connoisseurs or stamp collectors. I did not bring with me especially high expectations of Kyzyl, but what I encountered was nonetheless astonishing. The Kyzyl electric plant works only when the movie theatre is running. I saw the beautiful Pudovkin film Mother there. Tuvans rode from far and wide to look at this wonder. The film broke at least 20 times that night, but that only made the audience happy. So much the better. Now the fairy tale would last that much longer. They couldn't understand anything, not the slightest bit. The subtitles were in Russian. They couldn't read them, but their pleasure was nevertheless unending. When horses appeared, the whole place went crazy. They screamed and jumped up. They had a magnificent time. They didn't worry at all about who was a gendarme and who was a revolutionary, because they didn't understand what the fight was about. Whoever just fired, that was their man. Only once were they incensed and raving. I didn't understand the reason. The film didn't show anything outlandish. Running feet, a raised arm, a face. But that was precisely why. What they were shouting was translated for me. We paid full price. Why do you show us just a foot? Where is the head? We want to see a whole person. Why do you make the screen so small? We demand a screen on which a whole person has room. We want a big screen. A big screen. Big screen.
It has everything. It still, as far as I know, has everything. We had discovered, you see, a Shangri-La, a place in the world that nobody visited in a long time. And so we all, right then and there, said, we got to go there, of course.
All right.
Usually, big words signify very small specialties. And the quantum electrodynamics is a big word that signifies a very big subject. In fact, it's nearly all of physics. Let me explain a little bit about the history of the problem that we three have gotten the Nobel Prize for. It's the adventure of our science of physics is a perpetual attempt to recognize that the different aspects of nature are really different aspects of the same thing, that all the phenomena that you see, the great variety of different things, can all be explained, perhaps, as different aspects of some underlying business or some underlying laws or some underlying simplicity.
I have won a Nobel Prize, and it is a pain in the neck. And it destroys a great deal of the adventure of life for me. And it saddens and cuts off lots of things I would like to do in a sort of easy way, like a normal human being. I didn't see that the publicity would be so terrible. I didn't want it. I knew right away I didn't want it. I tried to figure out how not to get it, but like many other people who have gotten it, they realize after a few moments that if they refuse it, it would make more publicity than if you got it. A big shot he thinks he is, he refuses the Nobel Prize. You don't want that either. And what I think is the solution to this is that they should at least have the courtesy, the Swedish Academy, when they choose somebody, to call him up quietly and to offer him the prize. And if he doesn't want it, he can then say no, and there'll be no publicity because nobody has been told yet. And it would seem to me a rather simple solution.
You're not doing it now.
We were asked by someone to, she wanted to make a ballet of purely percussion music. I thought that's crazy. I thought ballets were like nothing but Swan Lake and so forth. And so she designed this ballet, and we went up to San Francisco as if it was a regular job. We got paid. We went to rehearsals. We went to the thing. It was an extremely small ballet school. There weren't more than 20 or 30 people in the audience for this whole ballet, okay? But it said on the program, music composed and produced by Richard Feynman and Ralph Layton. So I have composed music for the ballet, okay? Well, it turns out, crazy like always, that she won a contest in the United States and then went to Europe with a section of this ballet and some dancers, and entered a big European contest in which it ended up with just two contenders. One was a Latvian ballet group with Swan Lake and her thing, and it was in Paris. And she reports that the audience were always applauding more for hers than the other, but that the judges decided that the Swan Lake was better. And when she went up to the judges, which is permitted, to find out what it was that was the weakness, they said the music. So we were found out, in Paris at last. Somebody had enough cultural background to recognize the fakers, right? But then we get so damn far faking it, I always find fascinating, okay?
Dear Mr. Layton, we have received your letter requesting us to arrange a visit to Tuvanskaya. We regret to inform you that the subject area is beyond in-tourist travel routes. Therefore, we cannot arrange such a visit. Sincerely, in-tourist, Moscow. Dear Mr. Layton, thank you for your letter of the 3rd of January. It is a pleasure to welcome you to Tuvan Studies. Your appearance alone must double the number of people in the field. Unhappily, I can offer you very little hope of getting to Tuva. While there is no harm in going ahead and applying for a visa, the obstacles are, in my opinion, insurmountable.
It's very simple. I propose to give some lectures in Russia. They would be delighted, I think. I come there and I say that one of the conditions is that I travel to Tuva. And they say, indeed, it's fine. And then I say, but I give the lectures in Moscow after I visit Tuva, having learned a bit, you see? And they'll have to say yes to that, and I could go. I never understood before why I don't want to do it that way. And now I suddenly do. The whole idea is to have adventure. The way to have adventure is to do things at a lower level. It's not to ride on the freeway and to stop at the Holiday Inn.
All this and more at the world-famous San Bernardino Exotic Car Show this Saturday and Sunday at the National Airship Ground.
Learning to sky chul. Learning to sky erteminger chul.
We found somehow this Mongolian, Tuvan Russian phrase book, which was just wonderful.
Kadarchilaranga paran kanchar chidriptarasile.
But now that we had the phrase book, we would write in Tuvan. That would probably wake somebody up, you see. And so we struggled. This is the kind of thing I love, okay? Is try to put something together. So we're taking all of the phrases and trying to make the minimum changes on any of the phrases of the phrase book so that we would have as few errors as possible. We would be able to put together the phrases in order to say, greetings to your country from ours. We have a great interest in Tuva and so on, and we hope someday to come to visit, and we would look forward to see you, and greetings and good wishes, and if there's any way that you can send us tapes of the language, we would appreciate it, all this kind of stuff. And it sounds a little odd that you could make that all out of a phrase book, but actually it was a rather good phrase book and had a lot of stuff, and so that, phono recordings and things like that. So we wrote this letter into the vacuum, as usual, and nothing happened, and nothing happened. And then one day, Ralph comes running over, waving a letter in the air. He was so excited he didn't open it yet. The letter had come from Tuva with the stamps, Russian stamps, but it had come from Kizil, so we opened it. And then, of course, we couldn't read it because it was in Tuvan. We worked very patiently back and forth because we had to go through the phrase book into Russian and then from Russian into English. His name was Undar Dairuma. Greetings from Tuva. Kizil is a nice city. You will find we have a statue of the center of Asia. It was very much fun, of course, to do that, to discover different ways that they speak and how their language works and so on. And that was our first piece of anything that came out of Tuva that we received. And that was the beginning of hope, because it took us a number of years till we got to that stage. It's the kind of a puzzle I love. It's like deciphering hieroglyphics, which I enjoy. I spent a lot of time for the fun of it. There's a codex
a Mayan codex called the Dresden Codex, which is one of 3 books left from the hundreds of thousands of books that were extant at the time when the Spanish conquered Mexico. This is the only good one, was the Dresden Codex. I knew that that had been translated in 1850 or something by somebody. But I love puzzles, and I thought to myself, suppose I was Forsterman, who was the one who translated, and got a hold of this thing for the first time. What would I do? You know, what did he do? I didn't have to. I made believe that I was in the same position. It wasn't very difficult because there were bars and dots, and pretty soon you guess their numbers, and pretty soon you find out 5 dots is equivalent to a bar, and so on. And then after that, you notice periodicities and funny symbols, which are presumably names of days that go like our week does in a period, because they were the numbers of the days and the names of the days, etc. Okay, you'd work all that out. And then there'd be some very, very puzzling numbers, a whole lot of calculations involving multiples of 584, and you can't figure that out, what the heck that is. And you get the idea, well, maybe it's an astronomic thing they're observing. And you discover, when I went to the library at Caltech and looked up astronomical numbers of the planets, that from the point of view of the Earth, Venus appears in the same position in the sky again after 584 days, after 583.92 days. And you have to kind of understand the orbits, but you can see that there would be a period when Venus would be a morning star, about 230 days, and a period when it's an evening star, another period of about the same amount. But that the transition from the morning to the evening star is very quick at one part of the orbit. When it's on our side of the sun, we pass it quickly. And when it's on the far side, it's a relative angular motion, it's very slow. So it would look like a longer period where you can't see it because it's too close to the sun. At that time, when you see all this fit, and you know all of a sudden that you're reading about Venus and that they had made all these observations. You get one heck of an excitement, just like a physics discovery or something. Even though I know it's all been discovered, I didn't know it, that's all. I was doing it for the fun of it and see what I could discover. Discover eclipse numbers that I finally figured out, with the periods of the moon and eclipse prediction tables and things in this thing. It was very exciting, and that's an example. But what I really mean by deciphering hieroglyphics is more like cryptograms and puzzles, where you know there's sense behind this damn thing. The problem is to extract it with whatever tools and clues you've got. And that's lots of fun.
KPFK Los Angeles, it's time for Mario Cassetta with Many Worlds of Music.
Ralph, how do you happen to come by this record, which is a jewel?
I wrote to the author of a book about Tuva, Sevjan Weinstein, and he did most of his ethnographic work on Tuva. And he sent out this amazing record. Most people I talk to think that there is a flute or some other instrument accompanying the singer at the same time, and they're really astonished when they hear that it's one person making both of those tones.
As they're singing, there's a kind of a whistle that develops on top of the singing. And so it sounds like a man with 2 voices.
Ralph has this car, which has a license plate saying Tuva. For the fun of it, we had the car outside on the street in front here. We got some friends of ours to take our picture, trying to push this automobile as if it's kind of run out of gas or something, up the hill. We're faking, of course, that we're pushing so hard. And we got a picture, so we sent it to Undar and said, see how hard we're working to get to Tuva. It's Tuva or bust or something like that. That's a joke. And he was delighted and took it to the local newspaper, the Kizil newspaper. And they printed the picture with a caption that I think we had written, actually. Somewhere along the line, we found out that botanists, a group of botanists who were able to go to Tuva, it looked to us that they were counting the leaf buds or whatever you do when you're a botanist. And we were kind of disappointed that these guys had gotten there ahead of us, and also that they hadn't fully appreciated the wonderful place we imagined that they were going to. But we got from them the idea that the reason it was easy to go is that they had something to do. So we had to find some kind of a thing that would officially make sense that we had to go to Tuva. Then Ralph found out that there was going to be a great throat singing contest and conference for a week, somewhere way out in the west edge of Mongolia, right near Tuva. You know, it was a part of Mongolia you don't ordinarily go, and it was right near Tuva. Of course, there were various fantasy dreams of donning old robes and old rags and so on, because we'd meet these guys. We'd meet the Tuvans in Mongolia, and then they'd carry us back in their wagons, and we'd see a part of Tuva. Maybe, okay? I know we were all excited to go to this, but you see, even if we didn't get to Tuva, that would have been interesting too. You have to understand that every plot, even though it was a high chance of failure, as far as the ultimate aim was concerned, would always turn out, we suppose, to be a big adventure. After all, it ain't everybody that goes across to visit the throat singing conference in the western part of Mongolia. So we tried to join up and sign up for this and get everything ready. And there was a change in the government, and the Minister of Culture changed. And he decided they weren't going to have a throat singing conference in Mongolia. So that fell through.
In January 1986, the Challenger space shuttle exploded on takeoff. Feynman was invited to join the Presidential Commission to investigate the accident.
I have a policy, practically, of never going near Washington. And I called up various friends of mine who were connected to the space program one way or the other, and tried to ask them if they didn't see whether I should go or somebody else could do it just as well. And they both told me, no, you'd ought to do it. I'm still trying to get out of it, and I'm talking to my wife, and I asked her, and I have to be immodest here to explain the effect She said, well, she said, I said somebody else could do it. She says, if you're not on the commission, there'll be 12 members in a little knot, which will go from one place to the other, figure it all out and write a report. If you're on this thing, there'll be 11 guys in a knot going around, looking in, writing a report, and one guy, like a mosquito, running all over the place, and you probably won't find anything. But if there's something interesting, if there's something strange about it or something like that, you'll find it, and it wouldn't have been found otherwise. Well, I had to believe her because I know how I act. I'm an explorer, okay? I get curious about everything, and I want to investigate all kinds of stuff. And so I knew she was right, and that I had no further excuse because I could make a contribution that not everybody could make. Could be true, untrue. It's a certain, anyway, she used my lack of modesty to convince me to do it, and I did it.
The commission released 4 internal NASA memos in which mid-level space agency officials had warned of the potential for problems with the O-ring seals. When sections of the solid fuel rocket are joined, the walls fit together like this, and the seal is protected by 2 resilient rubber O-rings meant to prevent burning fuel from escaping out the side of the rocket. NASA officials discounted the possible effect of cold weather on the resiliency of the rubber O-ring on launch day, but Commission member Richard Feynman, after examining the O-ring, had a surprise.
Oh, I took the stuff that I got out of your seal and I put it in ice water. And I discovered that when you put some pressure on it for a while and then undo it, it maintains, it doesn't stretch back, it stays the same dimension. In other words, for a few seconds at least, and more seconds than that, there's no resilience in this particular material when it's at a temperature of 32 degrees. I believe that has some significance for our problem. Dearest Gwyneth and Michelle, this is the first time I have had time to write to you. I miss you and may figure out later how I can get a day off and visit. This is an adventure as good as some of the others in my book. I already smell certain rats that I will not forget because I just love the smell of rats, for it is the spoor of exciting adventure. Tuva or bust. Love, Richard.
Chairman William Rogers personally brought the commission report to the White House this evening. Earlier in the day, he'd been asked about it.
It's been a long 4 months. Are you satisfied with your work?
Well, satisfaction is not the right word. I think the report is a good, thorough report.
But it developed Rogers had barely managed to keep his commission completely united. One prominent member had threatened not to sign the report. That was Richard Feynman, the Nobel Prize-winning physicist who startled the commission months ago when he dipped an O-ring into his glass of ice water to show that it wouldn't work when it was cold. A NASA analysis had projected that the chance of a shuttle accident was only 1 in 100,000. But Feynman ridiculed that in a harshly worded critique written for the report. But Chairman Rogers, according to other commissioners, thought Feynman's criticism could be too damaging to NASA, and Rogers said he was going to throw it out of the final report. Late last week, an angry Feynman sent a letter to Rogers, threatening not to sign the report as a matter of conscience. At that point, Rogers and his staff backed down somewhat. They agreed to include a toned-down version of Feynman's critique of NASA in an appendix to the report to be published next month.
Feynman's minority report ended with these words: NASA owes it to the citizens from whom it asks support to be frank, honest, and informative, so that these citizens can make the wisest decisions for the use of their limited resources. For a successful technology, reality must take precedence over public relations, for nature cannot be fooled.
I didn't find out much. I found out later that when I thought I was doing something independently, I was being worked, operated by somebody else who wanted to get something done without involving himself, and so forth. So those guys are clever, you know. I think I'm running around on my own hook, getting a clue here and a clue there, but those clues were just little taps to make me run in the right direction.
I was being had to a certain extent. On the other hand, I enjoyed it. Then it was fun to see what that crazy place is like. Ralph discovered that there was a museum exhibit associated with the Silk Road, which had a lot of Tuvan artifacts and things in it, which was at present in Sweden. So Ralph's idea there was that he would go to Sweden, acting as if he could get that exhibit transferred to the United States. And then, when it was transferred to the United States, we would be the representative in the United States to make contact, to look at sites where the things came from, to take pictures that would work in the exhibit, to do various things associated with it. We become museum people that had to go there in order to make the exhibit work.
Ralph went to several museums with details of the Silk Road exhibition. Finally, he and Feynman met the curator of the Los Angeles County Museum.
During the conversation, in which Ralph was explaining all these costs, he finally said, I think maybe we'll do this, but what is your finder's fee? And Ralph said, there is no finder's fee. He says, well, that's kind of incredible. Well, why are you doing this? He says, because we want to arrange some way that we can get to Tuva, and that's our finder's fee. And that was the way that we first got a real chance to go to Tuva. By moving the earth, I mean, by getting an exhibit to be transferred to America, and so on. Well, the Russians laughed, because 2/3 of their protocol were various gimmicks for getting Russians to come here. There were all kinds of people, 17 different people were coming from Russia for this exhibit. So they understood this trick, see? They would get to see the mysterious Disneyland. The first ones to come were high in the system. They were the curator and Professor Kapitsa, Andrei Kapitsa. We took them around and introduced them to some of our hippie-like people who have parrots and make music and enjoy life and have a funny view. And he just utterly delighted with all this. And he said, you should come to Tuva, and I'm going to guarantee it. I think that he understands what I understand, but what he likes and what I like are the same. You don't want to be treated as anybody special. Just a regular guy, he's just a Russian that's visiting, and these guys all shake hands with him. He's not the Academy of Science vice president, deputy in charge. You know, none of that. Nobody said a damn word about that. He was happy. So I hope that the trip he's arranging for us will turn out that way, if it'll turn out at all, which is still a question.
Three days later, Feynman went into hospital. He died on Monday, the 15th of February. Two days after his death, a letter arrived from Moscow.
Dear Professor Feynman, I have the great pleasure to invite you, your wife, and 4 of your colleagues to visit the Soviet Union. I was informed by Professor Kapitsa that you would like to visit Tuva and get acquainted of its sightseeings. We consider the most favorable time for such a trip to be the period of May and June 1988. Your trip will take 3 to 4 weeks. Kindly note that the Academy of Sciences will cover your expenses. Yours sincerely, Vice President Velikov.
Let me show you something here. I'm not usually good at keeping secrets, but this one I kept. I was going to break these out at the monument when we finally reached our goal. Things like this, T-shirt, Tuva with a map, stuff. And another one, you know how you have I love New York, I love California. This one says Kizzle, love I. And we're going to have souvenir hats here. Tuva, center of Asia and everything, but the chief never knew about it. And now I regret I didn't tell him. So, anyway, it takes the edge off the fun.
Can I ask you, Ralph? I mean, I'll try anyway. What's going to happen now? I mean, to the Tuva project?
It's hard to tell. I don't know what my feelings are going to be in a few months from now or whatever. It's been a consuming kind of a thing. But on the other hand, certain factors are working their way into this now. Things like, well, tax time is coming up, and we got to think about, can we afford a trip like this? And I never thought of things like that before. Financial considerations never worked into the equation before, but now I'm starting to think of that. And I think that must indicate that I'm not as set on it, because I realize it was the adventure with my friend that this was all about.
Well, getting a little philosophical and serious, okay? Let's go back to what we're doing. One day we look at a map and its capital is KYZYL. We've decided it would be fun to go there because it's so obscure and peculiar. It's a game. It's not serious. It doesn't involve some deep philosophical point of view about authorities or anything. It's just fun of having an adventure to try to go to a land that we'd never heard of, that we knew was an independent country once. It's no longer an independent country. Find out what it's like and discover as we went along that nobody went there for a long time and it's isolated. Made it more interesting. You know, many explorers like to go to places that are unusual, and it's only for the fun of it. And I don't go for this philosophical interpretation of our deeper understanding of what we're doing. We haven't any deep understanding of what we're doing. If we tried to understand what we're doing, we'd go nutty.
Orange juice, I gotta have orange juice, I gotta have orange juice, I gotta have